Can you do an Australian accent?
Am I on? Good evening, Cornerstone Nation out there. How's everybody doing? Welcome back to Cornerstone Live on Facebook. I think we've become a little bit of an internet sensation, so thanks for making that possible. I'm going to slide this way a little bit to be a little bit more in the center. How's that for everybody? Okay, good. We're going to kind of do a little wrap up of where we've been here in a second. But if you want to get yourself ready, we're going to have some questions for you. A game. I'm going to give Emma, if you want to type your answers to that number. Actually, that's
Mom's number.
That's the wrong number. Sorry, your answers would not have made it. It's a 0. Okay, so 9284620 there. So get yourself ready to do that. Of course, you can always respond very quickly on Facebook. Just right back, so you can comment right back on there and get your answers out that way too. And big prizes for winners here as always. So, well, welcome back to our 5th installment in the series. Also, the 5th week of wonderful hair for everybody. I'm going to go ahead and turn this around so it doesn't cast a shadow. But speaking of hair, feel free, if you would like, to weigh in on this. Apparently, I am allowed to get a haircut because my job requires how I look. And since I'm doing this sort of a thing, I'm technically allowed to do that. So, but I'm not convinced that I should. If you really think that I should get a haircut, vote yes for haircut. But if you think, no, just let it go, then just type in let it go. And then I will tally that. And depending on who wins, that's what I'll do, at least for the next week. So anyway, we are again in the 5th installment of Come and See, Could He Be? And we have been considering and defending some of the foundational claims of Christianity on our way toward the more specific claims concerning the identity and accomplishments of Jesus Christ and what that has to do with us. Toward the close of John's gospel, it says that Jesus did many other miracles as well, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, that is the Messiah, and that by believing you may have life in his name. That verse is about presenting people with evidence that gives a solid reason for believing who Jesus is, who he says he is. And so through John's book, you can say that he is encouraging us to come and see. And even in chapter 4, he's the one who tells about the story of the Samaritan woman, who was the very woman who was the one who said, come and see. And her full line was this, actually: come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could he be the Messiah? So she's saying to her town, given this evidence of what he's done with me, don't you at least need to come out and check this all out for yourself? But that was spoken to a people that believed in God and who were already looking for the Messiah and had some idea of even what that meant. It wasn't a matter of if a Messiah was really going to come, but rather who and when. But our culture is not like that. It's become very diverse with no consensus about religious beliefs. So we may need to be thinking something more like, come and see the properties of the universe, or the mind-boggling aspects of the cell. Could there be a God? Come and see these prophecies in this book. Could this book be God's word to us? So we may need to start a little bit more foundational before telling people, come and see, could he be the Messiah? By studying these things, we shore up our own base as alternative views are going to certainly be presented to us. And you may not think that your faith can be shaken, but I will say it almost surely will unless you develop a healthy mindset of asking the hard questions and wisely seeking the answers. A few weeks ago, I showed you some pictures of sinkholes. Still have a couple of them. They look like that. See that car down in there? That's a pretty good one. This one, the car's just teetering on the edge. You can imagine being inside that. Anyway, it'd be pretty darn scary. Showed you some of those, and those sinkholes that had opened up and swallowed up what was sitting on top of them. And I think that's a really good illustration of why paying attention to the foundation is so important. The scary part of sinkholes is that the erosion is taking place underground and therefore often unbeknownst to those on top. And so unless one is aware of the extent of the erosion, before they know it, the house is in ruins and is at the bottom of the hole. So it can be with our Christian claims, our own Christian claims and beliefs. We may not be aware that critical erosion of the foundation has taken place even in us. And just like a sinkhole, the water displaces and carries away the solid foundation, so it is with our faith. Counterclaims, counter-beliefs, and counter-arguments can displace and carry away our confidence in Christianity. Discussing who Jesus is and what he said and what he did for us on the cross can become irrelevant where belief in God has been critically shaken or when the Bible's authority has been attacked and stolen away from us. Many Christian youth have given up their faith because of a persuasive biology teacher, for instance. So we want to examine our foundations for holes and strengthen them. And we need to be brutally honest with ourselves and where exactly and why do we doubt or disagree with any of the claims of Christianity. I think we can and need to become increasingly convinced that Christianity more adequately addresses every line of inquiry and explanation than anything else that would stand against it. Almost 25 years ago, I had a large high school group, maybe 75 or so, and at another church, and they were in all places in their faith. And one of them was a senior gal who had recently become very serious about her Christian walk, and it was impressive. And she appreciated the role that I'd had in her life, and she respected me. But I just so distinctly remember after I gave a talk about creation and evolution and challenging the story of evolution, how she immediately came up afterwards to me, and she was not happy. She was very upset with me. She said that she saw me as reasonable and that I'd been helpful to her and presenting and arguing for the truth. But now I had done great damage to my reputation and the message of Christianity that would go through me by speaking against the theory of evolution, which she thought was a fact. And so to be a evolution denier was going to do great damage to my reputation as a reasonable person. And she had not yet realized the incongruity between the two explanations, the Christian claims and the claims of evolution. So I encouraged her, sort of like this series, to check out the evidence and to see if it doesn't support the biblical claims, which she would do. And my hope with this series is the building and solidification of your own faith. Solidification, that's a fun word. Solidification. So solidification. And solidification, What does that mean? Well, that's solid.
Soda? Soda?
It's been a while since I've done the cursive thing, or spelled for that reason. So, solidify. So that's just solidify part, and then that's solid. No. Solid. Not salad, solid. So, to make solid, my hope with this series is the building and solidification of your own faith and your deep trust in all that the Bible says. And then beyond that, my hope is that you would see how faulty and dangerous is the ground under those who do not have the truth. The truth that you have is a gift and a responsibility. Therefore, be thankful for it, but be on your guard and prepare yourself to give an answer and to ask good questions in friendship. So that's our little intro. And now, if you are ready, I've got a little game for you guys. And are you ready for it? And the various groups you will represent as you type your answers in real quick. You'll be representing your group: middle school, high school, alum, and Cornerstoners by heart. Of heart. In heart. Cornerstone.
At heart.
Cornerstoners at heart. All right, here we go. All right, this is a great little one. If you know anything about politics and history, we'll see if you know any of this. This is for you alums, maybe high schoolers. Who knows? Maybe middle schoolers know this one too. But I would like two really famous. So these would be former. Two really famous former governors of California. And just as a hint, spelling is not correct spelling is not a huge priority here. All right, that is number one, and I'm going to give you 10 seconds before I give number two. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I need two state abbreviations. I need the state abbreviation for the state that is due west and connected by land to the state containing the Okefenokee Swamp. And I also need the state abbreviation of the state that contains the Okefenokee Swamp. So the state that is directly due west and connected by land to the state that contains the Okefenokee Swamp, and the state abbreviation for the state that contains the Okefenokee Swamp. Give you a little second for that.
Bill Jones said he was late and he needs to see you hatless in order to actually vote on the first thing you asked.
All right, Bill. You dare see me hatless. There it is. Okay, you got it. All right, a biblical question for you guys. Biblical question. Maybe you know the town that Jesus was in when he performed his very first miracle. If you do, name that town. And can you name the town where Jesus was when he performed the second miracle? You need both to get the points. Do we have any answers yet?
Amy Krantz.
Amy Krantz.
And Schwartz's.
All right, Amy Krantz. I knew the alum would come through there. Amy Krantz gets it. That is Ronald Reagan and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Did she spell it right?
I don't know. Looks like I think so. Probably.
All right, that doesn't surprise me at all. Very good, Amy. Nice job.
Ooh, that's
One for the alum.
This is it. Katie and Callie, Alabama, Florida.
Katie, Callie, Alabama, Florida. Did they have the state abbreviations or did they say?
LAFL.
Correct, Katie, Callie. Nice job. Good to have you guys out there again. All right. Next question. I need the names of the horse and his boy. I need the names of the horse and his boy. In that order, horse and his boy, in that order.
John Kern said, didn't George Lucas cut out the Okie Finoki swap because it would have made Return of the Jedi too long?
Dad, Josh the Kinsingers.
Kinsingers.
Cana.
What?
Cana. They vote Cana.
Okay,
For the biblical question, I think.
I think that's supposed to be the town.
Okay. Okay. Kinsingers out there. I got you there for Cana. You wrote it one time, so I'm not sure if you're saying Cana and Cana, or if you're saying, because I was saying the location of the first miracle, water into wine. Nice job. And then where was he for the second miracle? And I'm going to.
Capernaum and Cana.
Yeah.
What?
Capernaum.
That's what they wrote?
Yes.
Where Jesus was. The question was where Jesus was when he performed the first miracle, and where Jesus was when he performed the second miracle. So we still not absolutely nailed that one yet. But they're on the right track. All right. Last question.
Shasta
Amy
and
Grant.
Bree. Amy Crease.
All right.
Right after.
Technically, it's Bree and Shasta. That was Amy again?
Yeah, but
And the Gibson.
yeah, but the Mark Antonius said Bree and Shasta in that order, so you know.
And so did the Kinsingers, and so did
No, he said it both ways.
Oh no, he switched it.
Yeah, he switched it.
and Mom.
All right. Well, okay. All right. Last question for you guys. Put these names in chronological order by date. Earliest to then latest. Goliath, Elijah, Ruth, and Rachel. Goliath, Elijah, Ruth, and Rachel. Put those in chronological order. So what are we saying about the horse? So Amy got Shasta and Bree.
Yeah, just in the foot.
All right. So Katie Callie. So we got the middle school definitely got one so far, for sure.
Everyone wants you to keep your
And then alum definitely got one. The first one went to the alum with Reagan and Schwarzenegger. Did we get anybody through the miracles yet? Do we have 2 towns for the miracles? Did anybody write 2 towns down yet?
Well, all the guys came out of Capernaum. That's what.
All we have so far is Cana and Capernaum. Okay, I'm going to leave that one out there. Both the miracles were in the same book, I'll say, and not all that far away from each other, within a few chapters. And the horse and his boy, the first person back with that one was Amy.
Yeah.
All right.
So she did the boy and his boy.
Alum gets another point. Since Jack was the next one in with the proper order, I'm going to give a half a point for that.
Pretty sure like half of the hash mark.
Yeah, okay, so, and I guess we will move on, and you guys can get your answers in a second. Keep bringing them in, because there's still points out there. Wait,
We've got Rachel, Ruth, Goliath. Fourth person, I can't remember.
Elijah?
That would be Elijah, yeah.
Is that what they said?
Well, he said
Who?
person,
Bill
I can't
Jones.
remember.
Bill Jones said Rachel, Ruth, Goliath, and a fourth person I can't remember.
That was Bill?
Yeah.
Wow. Rachel, Ruth, Goliath, Elijah. Correct, Bill. Man, alum. Nice job, alum. And, man, my high school group. Come on, high school. All right, well. Do we have anybody for the miracles one? I did have a picture of a frog. Where's my picture of the frog? Is it under here?
I think the bottom right there.
Oh wait, I got it. I got it. Whoa. Okay. So,
Also,
no additional people for the,
Mark Antonius, they like the shirt.
oh,
Now we have the Teen Singers came back and said Cana first.
it's just a little subtle show of the shirt just underneath. What is that? What? King Singers came back with?
Cana first, Bethsaida second.
That is not correct. Come on, Kin Singers. You guys seem to be the only ones that are trying, so just keep going. Cana in this town, Cana in this town. Eventually you'll get it. You'll get it. Kin Singers seem to win everything for some reason, so I have confidence in you guys. All right, we'll tell you what, Becca, you keep tabs on that one, and as soon as we get a winner on that, well, you just take note of that, and I'll mention it up on the board here. Okay. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and hit this second part. Tonight we're gonna do the follow-up to last week, which is where did we come from? I do think this talk will be a tad longer. Sorry about that. I just thought it's time to kind of be done with this section and kind of move on. And you know, I would encourage you also to think, like, if you missed last week's and you're trying to pick up what we got this week, I would definitely encourage you to watch that last week, just to know that one very, very much fits together with this. They're really meant to be kind of taken as one. So going way back on our very first week in the series, we asked, now again, this is the series Come and See, Could He Be? But we asked the very foundational question, why is there stuff? And then on weeks 2 and 3, we asked, how are we a part of this stuff? And in answering this, we focused on 2 aspects of creation, which is, we asked, is the universe special? And also, is the earth unique? And last week began these 2 weeks on the topic of where did we come from? And this is, I think, extremely relevant today for us to discuss because of our culture's world and acceptance of evolution and the massive implications of this belief for our current life and our eternal life. As we consider this matter, let me remind you of the 2 frogs from last week. This frog and this frog. Okay, I want to remind you of those. Where was that? Richard Dawkins. And I wanted to, here it is. And I read a Richard Dawkins quote to you guys, and I want to kind of follow up on that a little bit. It was from his book, The Blind Watchmaker, and his explanation of evolution, and particularly kind of the way in which it works, natural selection, kind of being the blind watchmaker. Natural selection, he says, is the blind watchmaker. Blind because it does not see ahead, does not plan consequences, has no purpose in view, yet the living results of natural selection overwhelmingly impress us with the appearance of design as if by a master watchmaker, impress us with the illusion of design and planning. So all of these are appearances. The creation we see is an illusion, or has the illusion of design. In some ways, it fools us into thinking that it must have been designed. It's so beautiful, it's so ordered. It must have had some kind of designer and skill and intelligence behind it, but it doesn't. All right, that's kind of the idea of the book and the quote. And we're gonna have to examine that and take a look at that, and we need to consider that as a challenge against what we believe. I do not in any way hope to insult or be insulting to atheist evolutionists, but I can't downplay what they've done and are doing. And so, but my hope is not to insult, though I'm definitely opposed to them and will be saying things along that line. So, but I'm hoping that it doesn't come across as insulting. If you think it does, please let me know. And if you think I've mischaracterized any, them, please let me know that too. We know that when we look at something simple, like this, something even as simple as this, we know that somebody made that. We just automatically know that. You can see, again, like the person in the paper mill, they just, or, kind of taking in paper that they're shoving in to, to reprocess, but they run across this, even after years of seeing paper just crumpled and, in every kind of folded, crumpled form, but they see this and nobody has to tell them where this came from. Somebody had a good time making this and seeing it hop around. And yet, we've been trained through evolution to see something like this, to look at this, and to see no need for an intelligent designer to make it. All right? The Christian claim is the same for both questions. Like where did we come from? Where does animals and all those, where does all that come from? When did life begin? How did life begin? And where did advanced life come from? So if we had two questions, how did life begin? And how did advanced life forms come to be? The Christian answer is the same for both questions. Last week we discussed what the Bible says about how God created mankind and the significance that he placed on us. Similarly, the Bible tells us that God brought all life into existence. And just like mankind, each form of life, which we would call species, God created immediately and fully developed according to its kind. In Genesis, it tells us of the various things that are made each, on the days that he made the animals. It says he made the birds according to their birds, they are according to their kind, the fish of the sea according to their kind, the animals on land according to their kind, each already made in its kind. This claim is perfectly logical and consistent with the existence of God, who brought the universe into existence and set apart a sanctuary planet of life on which he would unfold the story of stories. So what's the evidence of life's creation according to the Bible? And where do we see that confirmed? Because we should be able to see that confirmed. That's a pretty basic claim of the Bible. And so there might be four. If you're taking notes, there would be four that I would want to point out to you. One would be the very clear delineation of species we observe in present life and in past life in the fossil record. This is what we would expect to see if God created creatures as they already are. So if an idea tries to argue that creatures developed by many, many tiny incremental steps, they would then have to try and somehow explain away the notable lack of transitional forms that are living now. I mean, where are the transitional forms that should be living now and should be there somewhere in the record in the past throughout the history of life, maybe in fossils or that sort of thing. It's interesting when they make a big deal whenever they claim that they found some sort of a missing link. It's just to me, that just always seems to really emphasize that these transitional forms, these links, just really aren't there. Like it's like, hey, we found one here. Look at this. Here's finally. It's like, they should be. If the theory is right, they should be they should be the norm, not the exception. I have listened. I do know the explanation. I think it's a huge stretch. I give them an A for effort in saying why, yes, it should look like there are all these transitional forms, but there's a good reason why there's not. I'm not sure how many people really buy that. Give them A for effort, but the form should be there. The transitional form should be. Okay, so number 2, but we don't see that, and the lack of that should give Christians, it does, I think, reasonably support the Christian claim. Number 2, the intelligence required to construct and fit together the structures of life with all its micro and macro complexity. Really quick, super overview, super simple on this and stuff I honestly don't get all that well, but I think you'd know that our body completely is an amazing system. So many different parts to it. And that in some ways it is made up of numerous necessary, amazing systems that work together in harmony. And so we have, our skeletal system, and we have our circulatory system. And without any of these systems, it doesn't work. We have, our nervous system. I mean, like, think about that one, and not only now do we have all these systems, each of these systems being amazing, but they all must work together, and they all are necessary for our total system to work. I think any one of these systems, even any of our senses, sight, hearing, smell, taste, our skin, for crying out loud, and the fact that, like, you touch it here, you don't actually, like, it feels like it's there, but where's that feeling taken? It's like your brain, like the feeling is in your brain. You see stuff in your brain, you smell stuff in your brain, but yet your body has the ability to make it feel right there. Our hands are just absolutely amazing. Our brains, mind-boggling amazing. Fingernails, we have fingernails. We have baby teeth that fall out on time, and then permanent ones that come in when we're big. Any one of these, I think, and 1,000 others, when we look at life, particularly human life, are reasons to believe in God, and I am sure was some of what gave David reason in Psalm 139 to say, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. But it's not just any one of them. We have all of them. All of them develop. Like, if you just thought, wow, what would it take for an eye to develop through natural processes? But it wasn't just an eye that developed, but also smell developed and hearing developed. And these are just mind-boggling things, but they all develop. And our systems, our senses, so many aspects of our bodies. And yet they not only are individually are impressive, but even more so that they have to work together in harmony, and the systems that are in us are necessary for the whole thing to work. And so if any one of the parts, like if any one of the parts isn't there, what's so difficult about this to explain in any other way other than creation is if any one of the parts isn't there fully functioning, then the entire system of who we are doesn't work. If you have your skeletal system, like it's awesome, and your nervous system, it's all, but your circulatory system just has a little, just a little problem with it. It's just not pumping it, it's just not pumping the way it should, or just kind of doesn't work. I mean, like it doesn't work. The whole thing has to work together, and it all has to be developed and working together for it to work. And so, so the idea that every single part of it is developing to a point that it all works is, I think, really difficult. Now, if there was some theory of mutation, having a mutation here and a mutation there that produced gradually every part of our bodies, we would say, how could it? meaning that a small change wouldn't be very helpful if every system must be functional to do any good. I just hope that makes sense. And if the systems are necessary for the survival of the organism, then blind natural selection would never do it. And that I think is no small problem. Along with that, speaking of no small problems, the very cells are also systems. There's also a system made up of systems. I mean, you know, the cell is a very intricate system, but it is made up of systems, and some systems inside the cell are irreducibly complex. The concept is called irreducible complexity, and we can see these systems at work, and there's no way that we know of to have one of these develop through natural processes. Irreducible complexity would be like if you take out any one part of the system, then it doesn't work. And so you need all the parts together working together, or it doesn't work, it doesn't function. And so how does something develop how does a system develop incrementally when all the parts are necessary for the functioning of the whole system? So these systems inside, so our bodies are systems inside systems inside systems inside systems, and it's like pondering a painting by Rembrandt. Imagine trying to explain how it developed by natural causes without a painter. That would be incredible. That'd be like looking at our body and trying to explain how that came about simply by natural causes. But then, if you were to discover that the painting was really made up of billions of microscopic paintings as beautiful as the one that you can see, then you'd have to say, at what point do you say that this must be the result of an intentional, skillful artist? This whole concept of irreducible complexity is kind of championed by a guy named Michael Behe, and I really encourage you to consider reading him. Now, you know, like, remember last week when we hold on a sec. Let me go on to number 3. So that was number 2. Number 3, the third, would be the purposeful mind required to originate and organize the informational language encoded in life. That would be the third, the third evidence that I would point to that confirms the biblical claim, is that there would be a purposeful mind required to originate and organize the informational language encoded in life. Remember last week when, when I mentioned, like being the first person to find an island and then coming across a cliff with a huge writing congratulating you of being the first person to have ever been there. And I would imagine that when you saw it, you may be scratching your head as to what really is going on here. But one thing I think you would know for sure is that you weren't actually the first. Well, why? Because something like reading that sign of congratulations on the cliff, that kind of order of language, requires intelligence. You just simply would know that. It's sort of like seeing an arrowhead on the ground. It's amazing that people can find little arrowheads on the ground that really hard, very primitive ones that hardly even look like much went into sharpening them down. And yet people are like, no, that's absolute, it just shows the absolute signs of work done to kind of get this thing down, and a tool was used on this, and we can see the intelligence and the intention behind making this thing into an arrowhead, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess I can see that. And yet when they look at the cell or look at the body, they may turn around, they may look at an arrowhead and say, wow, that just required a human being to do that. But then you look at the actual human being that may have made that, and that actual human being doesn't need anything to create the actual human being. And yet one is infinitely more complex than the other. Each of your cells contain the entire blueprint of your body. So every single cell contains the entire blueprint of your body. It's encoded, you probably know this, on a string-like looking, laddery looking thing that kind of twists structure called DNA. Your DNA hold about 3 billion bits of information, and they're like letters like in a book. And if they were like letters in a book, that book would be about 50 stories high. They are specifically organized to spell out things like your genes, which are in charge of your physical traits. And to build you according to these genes on the DNA, your cells, inside your cells, there is a reader of the DNA letters. And the section of letters read by the reader, so it'll read a part of the DNA, and the section that's read by the reader summons something called amino acids, but it summons the specific amino acid. And as it reads out this part of it and go, okay, that means this amino acid must come. And then it reads out another, and that means this specific amino acid must come. And it keeps reading it, and as it reads it, amino acids kind of come together. And so the DNA, as it's being read, summon amino acids that string together into a long string. And these then are, kind of come together to form your protein. And so there's 21 different kinds of amino acids, but they create thousands of different kinds of proteins. And your proteins can be roughly from 50, most of them are 100 to even 1,000 strings of amino acids long. And so these amino acids, when they come together in a particular order, and they have to come together in that exact order. The reader reads them out. It's already in the order in the DNA. When the reader reads it out, then the amino acids come together in that order, and this is what's going to create the protein, because the amino acid will then start, this string of amino acids will start to fold up, fold up, fold up, fold up, fold up, and it'll fold up into a specific shape. And that shape will then is intended to do the function for which that protein was meant to do. And there's been a little bit of work on this by some. And for one of these proteins to come together and fold up in a useful way, you can imagine how much order is associated in that. They say that would be like 1 in 10 to the 77, which is getting pretty close to how many atoms there are in the universe. That is to say that that's something that cannot happen by chance. That much order and intricacy is something, it just doesn't happen, that kind of thing. It's like a book, it just doesn't write itself, an author writes it. The only cause we know of for any kind of something like this is a mind, because it does involve this whole idea of encoding and putting language together. There are thousands of different proteins in your cells, and there are 42 million cells that are in your body. So your body's constantly making these, and your body's, the number of cells in your body is like 37 trillion. And these cells automatically know how and when to divide and to reproduce themselves. And just so you know, just your DNA alone, like if you take a single cell, took out the DNA and stretched it out, that would be 6 feet long, 6 feet of DNA long. And all your DNA from every cell, if you took out every cell of your body and stretched out every bit of your DNA in your cell, and you started at the sun, and you went out, you would pass the Earth, you go past Jupiter, you go all the way out to Pluto. And then you would come back to the sun. And then you do it again, just for fun, all the way out to Pluto, and then back. Twice to Pluto and back are the strings that are just in your body. This level of order, complexity, intricacy, and information and automation was not known until we had microscopes that let us see it. And as Christians, we certainly did not need to have these discoveries to convince us that God made us, but it's awesome to see this belief so powerfully confirmed in this way the more that we learn, which is just what we would expect. The fourth one is our consciousness, by which we contemplate things like our meaning, our morality, and our mortality. But we're going to get into that more next week. Okay, so now on the other side, there's another story of the world being taught, pervasively in our country and around the world that goes directly counter to the Christian claims that, about God and life. And it is this field of biology that lines have been most emphatically drawn. If God exists or not, this is where it counts the most. It answers who we are and why we are. Are we a blip or are we eternal? Do we matter or are we just matter? As we speak, we have to accept that that the atheists evolutionists have won this debate of public opinion. They've convinced human beings that life is from goo to you by way of the zoo. And I had to say that. I read a book called, that had the title, so I just had to do that. Now, before we get into the argument, it would be reasonable for you to be asking, how can explaining God away, as we've been looking at for weeks now, and making sure that he's not needed, be so very important to the atheist evolutionists, even at the point of reducing their own existence and ours to the level of belly button lint? Do they really just simply struggle with incredibly low self-esteem? Or are they just so impassioned by the data that they hold so tenaciously to their view? Are they just calling a spade a spade? Are they simply more willing to face the facts that we can't handle, that there is no God and we exist just as like noise and commotion? Or is there something else going on at another level of their heart that is impacting the way that they do science and makes them unwilling, regardless of the evidence, to honestly consider the existence of God? Next week, we're going to touch on that and then do more in the future. But this story of evolution begins, as we have discussed previously, with stuff, a universe that comes into existence from nothing. This, of course, is logically and astronomically problematic, but at least they don't have to believe in God. This stuff happens to not just be a universe, but is actually a universe generator that produces a random variety of universes with every possible property. Why? Because you can't have just one universe that is so specially astronomically fine-tuned for life, for that could suggest that the universe was made purposeful for life. Is there any evidence for such a universe generator? Well, what do you think? No, of course not. But it simply must exist, because if there is a universe generator that makes 10 to the 500 universes as proposed, then there just has to be a universe like ours. If it takes a universe generator to make our universe unspecial, they'll take it, because at least they don't have to believe in God. By the way, the existence of the universe generator would still does not answer where that came from, and they would still have, you still has to go back to, but where does stuff come from? And since we have life on our planet, as the story goes on, there's just got to be life crawling all over the galaxy and throughout the universe. Is there any evidence for this? No. It's all just conjecture based on the belief that there is nothing unique about the Earth and what's on it. For if there was, this could suggest the Earth and our star system was specially fashioned and harmonized for a reason. And so, though the factors necessary for sustaining life have increased, we understand our understanding of what it would take for life to exist on a planet. The factors are growing and growing and growing, becoming more and more unlikely that you would ever find a place in the whole universe that would have one. And potentially, as the data comes in, it could be astronomically low that you would ever have a place, but still the search for life goes on in vain, because at least they don't have to believe in God. So now to the story of life on Earth. They see life on Earth as nothing special, as we've been saying. Life will simply develop wherever it can develop, because that's what life does. So as soon as we heard, for example, that there could be water on Mars, there was all this confidence about sending probes there to find evidence of life, as if all it takes to develop life is water. But is that right? Well, not so much. The evidence shows that as amazing as the properties of our universe are for suitability for life, and as perfect as our earth is for being hospitable for life, it is not enough to ensure life on earth. Far, far, far from it. For once again, we get to use the word astronomical. For the evidence is clear and clear every year that it would be astronomically improbable upon astronomical improbability to the point of impossibility that life could come into existence from non-life without a very intelligent, powerful, purposeful mind. Now, before we take a look at some of the difficulties, I want to present quickly two main basic beliefs that atheist evolutionists have relied on in their work and often comes out in their arguments. And in saying this, I'm not saying that their theories aren't elaborate and even brilliant given what they have to work with, but their theories often include appeals to these beliefs. One is the belief in the power of time. They like to say that anything really can happen given enough time. The classic line says that if you have enough monkeys typing away at random, of course, that eventually will get the complete works of Shakespeare by accident. And to that, we just simply say, no, that's not how you get that. It's never how you get that. I like to picture the scene of monkeys throughout our whole galaxy, on every planet in our galaxy. And after typing for trillions and trillions of years or so, you have a monkey who has the first whole page of Hamlet complete. And then 2 pages, and a crowd starts gathering around this monkey, and all the monkeys stop and start gathering around this one monkey, and he just keeps going for it. And you know, I should ask you that, you know, like, if you had the task of typing out Hamlet, for instance, would you make any typos at all? You'd probably say, well, sure, you know, maybe even more than a few, but not this monkey. He's going for it. He's on fire. Page after page, flawlessly banging out one character after another. No sooner does he complete Hamlet than he's right on to Romeo and Juliet. And the galaxy of monkeys is now all around cheering ooh, 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 as he kind of goes on. And then he's done with that. And then it's on to Henry VIII. And then Much Ado About Nothing. And all the rest. And finally he gets to the last book, The Taming of the Shrew. And he's made it to the last page, the last sentence, the last word. And everyone's going crazy with amazement. And then he writes, "'Tis a wonder, by your leave, that she will be tamed so." But instead of hitting the T, he hit the Y right next door, saying, "She will be yamed so." And great tears break out as the foreman yells out, "Okay, all monkeys back to work. We'll get it next time." Chance and time, with this idea of monkeys in the works of Shakespeare, is the almighty equalizer. Shakespeare and a monkey. And I can't imagine that Shakespeare would feel very flattered by the comparison. Though you'll definitely hear this kind of argument today, there is another argument, so that time can do anything, but there's another argument, that I think is even more their go-to, and that is simply that it's, you know, they just say the belief that we will figure this out. There is I think that, you know, that something like there is an explanation. There are laws of physics, and we've yet to discover them, but we will get to this scientific reason of how this occurred without any need of a divine involvement. Many natural causes really have been figured out, but it can become, I think, sort of the default fallback, so that no one really ever has to be put in the spot of pondering the possibility of God. They can simply say, yes, we know God, we know life exists, we know it has to have had a purely natural cause. Since we will eventually find the natural cause, we can just keep God out of it. The answer's out there, and the idea of finding them is what gets us up in the morning. However, instead of getting closer to finding the answers about how life developed on Earth, those answers have become much, much further away. Why? Because the more we learn about life, the better our microscopes have become, the more unfathomable it becomes to explain its origin and complexity in any kind of naturalistic way. So you might think this new information might start to convince them to consider the existence of God, but it doesn't work that way. Biblically, we know that man's condition is such that no amount of evidence will be enough for one to accept God. Remember the reaction of the Pharisees when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. Even that was not enough to bring them to his side. So instead of looking at the miracle of life, at the increasingly incredible levels of complexity and seeing God, they remain undaunted and conclude that there simply must be even more amazing laws of nature that we have yet to realize before and are out there to be discovered. I will say that, yes, God has reached atheist scientists through the evidence of biology. But that is the work that only he can do, as it was when he reached us. Only he can do that work. So just some quick kind of concluding-ish thoughts in addressing the basic premise of the theory of evolution and its problems. Since Charles Darwin wrote his book, The Origin of Species, in 1856, atheists have banded together around the theory of evolution, which says that life, as we see it, was not created, but developed through purely natural processes, which, of course, is necessary to keep God out of the equation. To support this theory, they need to show first that life could have emerged originally on a dead planet, and second, they need to show that life could have gone from a low-level single-cell creature to high-level multi-cell creatures. Now, most of the focus on the debate has raged on this topic has been primarily on the second obstacle, the advancement into higher levels, the development of species through random mutations and natural selection. Did man really come from monkeys, sort of thing? Did fish come onto land? Did whales go back in? How did flight develop? Can an eye and a brain be built incrementally through mutations, and how long would it take? Somehow, evolutionists, as we've said, were so convincing and brilliant and elaborate in their presentations that evolution won the opinion of our country and world. We as a country now believe, generally speaking, in the evolution explanation, including not just the second obstacle, but the first obstacle, which is the origin of life. The surveys show that these are the two biggest reasons. Where did life come from and how did it advance? These are the two biggest reasons why people don't believe in God. And that does make perfect sense. If one story is right, the other story is wrong. If nothing, chance, and time is right, then God is out. But did they ever actually explain how we got over the first obstacle of life coming into existence in the first place? Not really. It sort of just got included as an assumption of the entire theory. The story of the beginning of life is of energy of some sort, lightning, for that's always good for life, or some volcano vent that starts producing chemical reactions that eventually lead to more and more parts that come together and then begins life, and it survives and it multiplies. There's only one problem with this theory. They don't have the slightest idea how any of it could have happened. Even trying to replicate in a controlled laboratory how the most basic chemicals of life were formed have failed. The hurdle is nearly infinitely high, and they haven't gotten even an inch off the ground to achieve the requirement of adequately explaining it by purely naturalistic causes. In this sense, evolution is dead before it even gets out of the starting gate, for it hardly matters if they claim they can explain how life has changed without God when it is utterly unexplainable where it came from in the first place. And you should never forget this. But going back to the change of life to advanced forms, the second obstacle that all the rage has been about, have they really figured out how life went from a one-cell organism to human beings? Just a couple more seconds here, guys. Well, let's take a look at the change agent that they say gets the job beautifully done, random mutations. First, I'll simply say that no parent wishes for their child to have a mutation. Mutation is some abnormal alteration in the DNA. My daughter has one that makes her pigment deficient. And among other things, this negatively affects her eyesight and how she tolerates sunlight. But they say that there are also positive mutations. Sounds like our DNA can be affected for the better or for the worse. Well, is that right? Because literally all of evolution is riding on that idea. The best, most extensive evidence of mutations is a 30-year experiment with a form of bacteria that reproduces numerous times a day. So this experiment has tracked some 50 or 60,000 generations of the E. coli bacteria. And in the study, they were looking at the effect of then mutations. So they looked back on 30 years of 50, 60,000 generations for mutations. This is the first point is what we would certainly expect. First point, they saw that 99% of all mutations had a negative effect of lost function. So they had a negative effect of lost function. The second point is the dagger. Of the 1% mutations that had a positive effect on its survivability, it was due to a loss of function. Never were advancements in DNA being made. So let's say like a car needed better gas mileage to survive a trip. Taking off the hood, taking off the doors might help it survive, but only by losing something and not by advancing. That is bad news for evolutionists. And it shouldn't surprise us who know where life came from. So I'm going to stop there, but I hope this encourages you to see some things here, your faith confirmed by studying some of this evidence a little bit, and how we consider the claims of our Christianity to be reasonable or not. And I think when we look at something like this, we see it is reasonable to the point of making anything else that goes counter to it unreasonable. We have a God who's wondrously made us and put us in a glorious universe on a perfect planet to be part of an amazing story. And so we're going to proceed into that story a little bit more. Next week, we're going to discuss our Christian claims about how we contemplate things like, and why we contemplate things like meaning and morality and our mortality. So that's the end. Thanks for hanging in there. It looks like we went a few minutes overboard, but we have winners for you. Yes, ma'am.
Angela, Cana, and Galilee.
Cana and Galilee. Galilee is more of a region. So let me ask a question.
That's it.
Okay, so the story goes that Jesus went back to Cana, and he when he was visiting, where it says he performed his first miracle, he was visiting there, and a man from Capernaum came to him and told him about his son who was sick, and Jesus said, "You can go, your son's going to get better." And so the man left and did find his son as he was. So the Kinsingers were right. The miracle technically took place, I guess you could say, in Capernaum, though where Jesus was when he did the miracle, Jesus himself did the miracle when he was in Cana, and he healed the boy who was in Capernaum. So the answer to that was, actually, he did his first miracle in Cana, and he did his second miracle when he was in Cana. Quite a distinguishing point for a little town like that. So anyway, guys, I hope you all are doing great. We're going to close out in a quick word of prayer, and then we'll see you again next week. And again, join us in our Bible studies. And if you need anything, we're always a phone call away. Father, thank you so much for our time to consider these things, and for the minds you've given us to think them through, and how you call us to consider the evidence, to come and see, and how you want us engaged in that. And we thank you that as we look into it, we do see that which supports the claims that we've been taught, and supports what you've told us in your word. And so I pray that you would give us great confidence that we're walking in the light, we're walking in the truth, and give us a great desire that we would be able to be a blessing to others and minister to others and be able to speak wisely to those around us when the opportunity comes up of some of these things. Lord, we thank you for all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.